What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, but it's not a Dr. Vibe show thing tonight. It's called M&M Explorers, and it's hosted by the Men and Masculinity organization, who I am very much a proud member of their core team. And we are having a series of conversations called M&M Explorers, where we examine different areas of manhood. And we have our first return guest, and no surprise, our first return guest is Robert Leung. And this time I'm going to give him a proper introduction. We didn't give it last time, so I told him he's going to get it this time. So Robert is a practicing life coach certified by the Coach Training Alliance and a member of the ICF International Coaching Federation with 25 years of experience successfully coaching men through life's challenges and transitions. He's also the creator of Heart of Man Coaching, working with men from all walks of life, helping them access, understand, and master the power of their emotions without compromising their masculinity. And we have another amazing conversation happening tonight. When I first had the pleasure of being introduced to Robert digitally, he gave us about 3 or 4 conversation topics and said, Robert, you can't be a one and done. You have to come back for more. Now, the first time we had him on M&M Explorers, he nailed it and dropped knowledge bombs about the living eulogy. And that I've shared that conversation with so many people. And we need to do a part 2 of that, by the way. But tonight, we're going to be talking about another concept that Robert's come up with called the Family Roundtable. I'm just going to give a little background on it. And it's a series of questions that Robert asks. What would it be like if you sat down with your family and simply told each other how you feel about each other? How much closer and stronger would your family be? How much happier and more confident would our children be? And if we all did that, how much better would our communities and society would be? So with that very good introduction, I think I did okay.
I think you did great.
Yeah, we'd like to welcome back to M&M Explorers, Mr. Robert Leung. How are you, sir?
I'm very good, Dr. Vibe. It's great to be back here again, and I'm honored to be a repeat customer.
Well, you're going to be probably a 3-timer, so enjoy the moment.
I absolutely will, and I look forward to the next time as well. I had a great time the last time, and I think it was a very powerful and informative discussion that we had, and I think tonight will be as well. Talking about the family and the Family Roundtable, which is about the family unit, which is the sort of the fundamental unit of our building block of our society, and it as such it is a part of every aspect of our lives.
Let me ask, give us some background on how you came up with this concept.
Thanks. It actually, no surprise, I suppose, came from my interactions with my own family and realizing that although I always envisioned us as a very close family, in fact, I always thought of my family as a duplicate of Father Knows Best. And one day something occurred to radically remind me that we were not the ideal family in terms of Father Knows Best. And it happened when I was young, and it really changed my perspective on things. And as I got older, I sort of fell into the cultural stereotype or belief that I think we have, that our families are these kind of ideal groups, like Father Knows Best, like families that we see on TV shows and in movies. And when in fact there seems to be very little conversation or dialogue that actually happens of meaning in families that brings them into a place of more intimacy. But we imagine that that's true until perhaps, many of us have the same experience that I had, that one day something happens and it makes you realize that you're really not as close or ideal a family as you thought you were. So that's what where the concept for the Family Roundtable started. I recognize that in my family, we didn't really talk to each other, in an intimate or even in a regular fashion. We talked about things that had to be done or didn't get done, responsibilities. And the only times we really talked on an intimate level was usually when there was some problem or issue that occurred. And I thought one year at Christmas time it would be the perfect occasion to get together with the family and have a different kind of conversation. And so I imagined this concept of what would it be like if you sat down with your family and you took turns, each person telling each other person at the table how you feel about them.
Excellent. I want to cycle back to the younger Robert, and in the younger Robert.
I'd like
journey,
to go back to him too, actually.
I think many of us would like to go. And believe it or not, when I was younger, I did have hair, but just want to you realize that. But I don't know if I'll show any pictures of that. But those under lock, you may be able to finagle to make me show it once in a while. In your younger days, was the communication within the family a good communication?
I'd like to think so, but I think it was kind of a bare bones kind of conversation. And, I think I had a good dialogue with my mom. I didn't have much communication with my dad at all. He was in the Merchant Marine. He was away most of the time that I was growing up. And, he didn't grow up in a family where he had conversations with his father. And so we didn't have much of that. So much of the communication was with my mom. And I thought that was pretty good.
Okay. All right. Now, and as you grew up, got into manhood, did that improve at all? And when did it take time to make that? You mentioned it made that turn, but did you have that at all as you were growing into manhood?
I think I did have some of that. I mean, there was some conversation, but I don't think there was a regular kind of dialogue that was just almost like a check-in. How are you doing? What's really going on for you? How do you feel? And I think that just that question alone, how do you feel, and really examining that on a regular basis is really a critical part of our mental and emotional health. And I think it should start within the family dynamic.
Wow, that's challenging. So we talk about the origin. What about the concept piece when it comes to this?
I mentioned that, at Christmas time, I'd go down and I'd visit with my family. At my sister's, we'd usually gather. And I realized that the first day that I got there, everything was fine. It was Christmas. There were presents. My niece and nephew were there. But probably by the end of the second day or the third day, the sort of same family little arguments would happen, the kind of sniping, my dad arguing with my mom, me and my sister going at it. And I thought, well, how did that go from this happy time at Christmas to this kind of right back to the kind of sniping we did when we lived together, back when I was younger. And it occurred to me that we should talk to each other more somehow and talk about that. It was just missing some communication there. Why were we having these same old resentments, the same kinds of arguments that we used to have? And so I came up with this idea. I said, well, why don't we just sit at the table and we'll just tell each other how we feel about each other? It didn't sound like a dramatic concept at the time. I thought, well, we could talk to each other. We're a family. I mean, families, when I talk to people about this idea, everybody agrees that family are the people that we're closest to. And wow. If that's true, then why is it so difficult for us to talk to each other and tell each other how we really feel? And on some level, families are very intimate, but they're not very intimate in terms of expressing their needs or their feelings to each other. So I had this idea. We sat down after dinner. I said, we're going to sit down after dinner. We're going to sit. Each one of us is going to take a turn telling each other person at the table how we feel about them. And I was kind of shocked at the response because everybody said, there's no way we're doing this. There's absolutely no way. And I thought they might be shy about it, but I didn't think they were going to be like in complete refusal. So I was prepared. I said, my niece and nephew are going to go first. And they were 3 and 5 respectively. And everybody moaned and groaned. And I said, no, come on, the kids are going to go. Let's at least humor them, So they said, because it was the kids, everybody sat down again. And I asked my niece, who was 3 at the time, that she could tell anybody at the table anything that she wanted to tell them. And she turned right to her father, my brother-in-law, and she said, I wish my daddy would spend more time with me.
Wow.
She was 3 years old. And my brother-in-law looked like somebody hit him with a 2x4. I mean, he was as stunned as everybody else was. And it brought tears to his eyes. He started weeping. And my mother started crying, and my sister started crying. And by the end of this exercise, we all had some tears in our eyes. But ultimately, they were tears of joy, because we were able to realize how much we did love each other and actually tell each other that. Something that I don't think I had not seen my father tell my mother that he loved her. I'm sure he did, but he never really voiced that in front of us. And so it changed, it began to change my family. And it was a stunning event. And there were no arguments the next couple of days that I spent there, which was quite remarkable. No sniping between me and my sister, my mom and dad, my sister and her husband. It was just like this kind of glow fell over the family. And so we decided to do that every year. And we did it for 27 years until my parents passed.
How long?
27 years. Every year at Christmas time, we would do this event. And it changed my family. It changed the way we talked to each other, the way we treated each other. We resolved differences and resentments. We let go of many things. We got to understand things about each other that we never did before, and we worked some things out. And this was just once a year, but it opened us up for a dialogue that happened, during the year as well.
Nice. Before we go further, just want to welcome a number of people watching live right now. John E., Alex Wadsworth, Big Bad Brad, Roden, JJ, Deb, Mark, and Lee, of course. So if anyone also wants to jump in and ask any questions or add value to the conversation, there are some spaces open. Oh, Alex is going to jump in.
I'm right. Listen, I caught it just a few minutes ago, and the passion of Robert and just the sincerity of his voice just seemed like it was really important. And I guess I missed you're welcome. The point, you said, my family does this every time. It brought us closer together, but what is because I came in late. I mean, I can go back and rewatch afterwards, but if you can give me a quick summary.
Oh, sure, I'd like to. It simply put, it's each person takes a turn telling each other person at the table how they feel about them. That's simply what it is. An honest, emotion, straightforward, looking at each other and telling each other how you feel about them.
So just you pick one person, or you tell everybody?
No, you tell everybody. You go around the table, and each person tells each other person, and then the next person goes and tells each other person. And so by the time
once a year?
Once a year for 27 years, I should say.
Wow.
Yeah, and it made our Christmas a really joyful and unique and special time, even though we went kicking and screaming into it, and I had to drag everybody to the table the first couple of years. And eventually my niece and nephew who were 3 and 5 at the time, they participated throughout the entire thing. But as they got older, the things that they had to say were profound. Wow, you don't realize, I mean, she was 3 years old and she recognized that her father didn't spend enough time with her. She's 3. I mean, I never would have guessed that.
That's the testimony that hit me the hardest, because I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old and 8, and they always beg me for time. And I'm always like, I'm doing this. I played with her for 10 minutes tonight, and to her, it was an eternity,
right?
Because I was able to, but thank you very much for letting me cut in here. I'm glad you were able to tell me that. The curiosity was killing me. Dr. Vibe, another great guest. You're
very
awesome.
welcome.
Thank you guys. I'll be listening though. I'm not leaving. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Alex.
Problem. Thanks, Alex. And if you want to jump back in, feel free. No problem. So Lee, not Lee. I've got Robert. So I'm thinking about Lee.
Okay.
Robert, 27 years.
Yeah.
When did you start adapting or introducing this to the men that you coached?
Well, I didn't start coaching until much later, although I was coaching in some form or another. I was part of a men's group, as I may have mentioned previously, And I introduced it there on my men's team. And I started talking to the men I knew in the extended circle of men that were part of the organization about this idea. And I spoke to many men and women about it. Actually, there were a couple of big events, and I did a talk about it. And I found, not surprisingly, I guess, although I was kind of surprised, that I spoke to hundreds of people over the years, and everybody said, wow, that's a great idea, but I could never do that with my family. That was, without a doubt, the majority of people I spoke to had that same response. There was this fear of having those kind of conversations with their family, that they wouldn't understand, that they couldn't really be that open. And it was kind of shocking. I think I was really surprised at that. But in a way, I shouldn't have been, because my family was very much the same initially. And I think that there's an epidemic of that kind of situation that exists in families where they don't really talk about how they really feel. And there's some kind of bizarre irony about that. I don't know if you had that experience with your family, but
yeah, well, it's really interesting, and that when our family gets together, it's all social, and that we don't get down to that level that often,
right?
And and even just doing the impact of it, just doing it at least once a year, can be huge.
Yes, yeah, it really is. I think however often you do it, if you just to have those kinds of conversation, I mean, very often we think everybody knows how we feel. We don't want to make ourselves, emotionally vulnerable by putting ourselves out there, even with our own families. So we don't say a lot of the things that we feel. And it's so important.
So I want to jump on that, especially since this is M&M Explorers. I want to sort of look at this from the man's perspective. What are some of the causes why men aren't, in your opinion, why men aren't saying the way they feel?
Well, I think that's pretty obvious. And, I think we're uncomfortable with our feelings, and we're not used to expressing them. And that's a part of masculinity in our country, culturally. I think we're trained that way. I was certainly trained that way by my father. You don't express emotion. You don't cry. You don't open yourself up that way, because it's part of being tough. It's part of being masculine. I think some of that has changed, but I don't think it's changed as much as we believe it has. I think when it comes to actually talking about our feelings and being vulnerable, we're still not that far away from my father's generation.
But why do you feel we haven't made as much progress as we've needed to in that area then?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't think there are many reasons for us that we feel we have to change. Restricting and repressing our emotions. I read someplace once a while ago that it's one of the fundamental reasons that men die earlier than women do. I read a couple of studies that said that repressing your emotions has negative effects on our health. And so not crying and not expressing how you feel, affects our bodies. It affects how long we live, our longevity. That's how important it is. Building strong relationships with the people who matter to us and our families is another casualty of not being able to express our feelings.
What do you feel are some of the non-positive effects because of the lack of the Family Roundtable?
Well, I look at my niece who was 3 years old, who wasn't getting the care and love she felt she needed from her father. That's a pretty serious deficit in her young life to have that, the guidance, the confidence that I think having strong relationships, especially when you're a child, I think are critical. Modeling, the behavior for how to have healthy relationships and how to interact with each other. I mean, that's another thing that affects us, not just in families, but socially and culturally. I think not being able to express your emotions leaves us feeling less joy in our lives. Not being aware of who we really are and not having the ability to express that takes away from how you live your life. So I think it affects us dramatically. I mean, I think you could also argue that repressing those emotions affects, marriages. It affects the violence in our society. I mean, it's possible to extrapolate that throughout every part of our lives.
True. Just sharing a message here. Mark says, "Hey, Robert, you are awesome, and we're all rooting for you. And we're going to break off and have our call. I'll see you Friday, and we'll all talk to you next week."
Thanks, Mark, and thanks to the rest of the men for. I had another call tonight, and I had to switch off to do this. But thank you for being there. I appreciate it.
Nice. I want to get back to when you introduced this concept to some of the men that you mentor and coach. And first of all, how did they accept it initially? And for the ones that did accept it, what was the feedback you were getting from them when they started to implement this?
I've only had 2 men try that. Most of them were open to it, and I think because we were in a coaching dialogue, I think they were probably more open to the idea. And they had success in both cases. One case a limited success, but it was a major accomplishment for him to be willing to step up and take that leadership position with his family too, I think. But he said he felt that just the act of doing it, they had a short conversation over dinner. He said he felt closer to his children, closer to his wife. He said in both cases, their wives were surprised when they suggested it. So I think it improved their relationship just by being willing to try that. So in many cases, I think just being willing to put it out there brings the family closer together.
Nice. Very, very good. I guess on the larger scale or a wider scale, what do you feel the state of the family is these days on average? What obviously the communication is lacking. What other things do you feel are lacking in family life these days in a North American sense?
Well, I've spent most of my time really looking into this aspect of it, but I suspect that if you're not really telling your family members how you feel, if you don't feel you have the freedom or the safety and security to be able to do that, to openly speak about things that you may be concerned about, that may be troubling you, that, the family dynamic is, I think it's, as I said, the fundamental building block of our society. But I'm not sure how able it is to accept criticism within itself. You're either, my experience with families, my own included, but in observing many other families, is that, it's a pack mentality. Mm-hmm. And if you disagree with that, you're on the outside of the pack. It's almost like you're a traitor sometimes, So it's a risky business, taking an outlying position with your family sometimes if you don't feel safe enough to do that. And I think that's part of the reason people don't always completely voice the truth that they're feeling, even within their own families. In some ways, the closeness, the physical closeness in some cases, and then the intimacy prevents us from being open and honest.
Okay. Big Bad Brad is saying some family members don't want to hear how I feel about them. LOL.
No, I get what you're saying, Brad. I really do. And I encountered the same thing with my family. But ultimately, when we did have those conversations, we found a new level of love and communication that was available to us that we didn't really know before, that we weren't sure was there. And, I'm relieved to say that it wasn't all hearts and flowers when we had these conversations. There were some arguments, and there's some protests as well. But ultimately, we found that we had a secure foundation to build on.
Okay. Alex is back with us. Come on,
hey,
back.
Alex.
Hey, thanks for having me back on. something happened that was funny. I told you I was going to stay on and listen, and then my brother called.
Right.
And
Really?
I'm talking to my brother, and I'm like, listen, I'm trying to learn how to communicate with you better, and then I hung up with him. So,
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Thanks, Alex.
so I wanted to hop on it. We do at dinner time, instead of doing like a prayer, because that's kind of not where we are in our family. We do a
Right.
thing called 3 thankful things, and
Yeah.
my kids often, if we don't push the issue, but if they've had a good time with their brother or sister, they'll just say, I'm thankful for my sister, I'm thankful for my brother. And we've been doing this for over 4 years now, and we'll see that there might be a big chaos, a big storm before dinner, but then at dinner, when we express our love to each other, it's the rest of the day is pretty easy until bedtime, and then it becomes chaotic again. No, just kidding. So
No, I think that's great, Alex. I really do. I think that alone begins to really bring the family together and have some dialogue about saying how we feel about each other. It's so important to know how the people who matter to you feel about you, and be able to express that. I honor you for that. That's great work.
Alex, I want to ask, what differences have you noticed in your children with that practice, and what differences have there been as a father doing that?
Well, I'll kind of start by saying this. Before my wife and I had kids, my wife is kind of the opposite of what you're saying. So I'm the man in the relationship. I'm the one expressing my feelings and all that kind of stuff, right? But she doesn't express her feelings. She's just not that way. She just doesn't want, But what we have found at this dinner time, it has allowed her to open up more and gives her an opportunity in a comfortable zone to say that she appreciates people and that she loves us. And because her growing up, military family, very kind of cold. My dad was all about the hugs and the kisses and the love and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of the opposite in our situation. But it's that opportunity to say thankful things has just given us all an opportunity to just be kinder and nicer. And so as a father, better communication all around, I guess, if that answers your question.
Yeah. I guarantee your kids will remember that too.
Yeah. We try to sit down for dinner at least 5 times a week, with sports and school and all that kind of stuff.
That's great.
We try to.
Wow.
And like my wife and I are a pretty good team about it. We'll say, oh, let's just get pizza. Okay. As long as we sit down at the table, or let's do this. As long as we sit down, even if it's for 5 minutes, cause sometimes they don't have time. I just make it the time to say thankful things. Even if you just want to sit down to say thankful things and leave, that's fine too.
Yeah. And I was just want to ask, how many other families do you know who keep that kind of tradition? I don't think many.
I don't know any. I don't, because I'm not really in their house, but when we have guests over, very often the kids who are 8 to 12 years old will say, we don't do this. My family doesn't sit down. I get a paper plate and I sit in the living room. My mom sits in her bed. Often we hear that.
Yeah.
So, but I just tell them, everybody's got their own thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me ask Alex, let me ask Alex, did you come from that tradition when you were growing up? Did you have that eating together as a family?
Well, I'll tell you this. I come from 12 brothers, or 7 brothers, 5 sisters, right?
Oh, wow.
7 boys, 5 girls. So if you didn't sit at the table or the trough, you didn't eat.
You didn't eat. That's funny. That's funny. So you made sure you were there, right?
They called me the human garbage disposal because I waited for everyone's scraps. I couldn't wait.
I hear you.
Oh,
that's funny. That's a great story.
Yeah.
So I would wonder how many people who are hesitant to do this either didn't have a tradition or had a tradition of doing this. I think that may have an impact on how willing people are wanting to take that step, because in a conversation like this, especially for men, doing something like this, vulnerability comes up.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that experience growing up, it makes it a bigger cliff to jump off of.
Absolutely does. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with you. And I think vulnerability is an act of courage. I think we have to look at it that way.
Nice.
The people you work with, how often do you do they say that they sit with as a family and all that? What's kind of the norm?
Virtually never. It's pretty much the way you talked about it, which people are grabbing and running, eating at different times on their way out. People just passing by each other. So nobody rarely, unless it's a special, holiday or something like that. Usually people are just, on the run.
Yeah, we say no phones at the table, and it blows our guests away. Oh, but
wow,
I have to. I'm like, you don't have to do anything. Not at my dinner table.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that in itself is extraordinary.
It's
Absolutely.
hard because my three pointed out to our guests, there's no phones at the table. There's no phones.
That's great. I love that. That's really great, Alex. That's extraordinary.
No, I'm actually getting.
Congratulations.
To that. I'm getting to that myself. Where there used to be a time I used to sleep with my phone beside me. I don't anymore. When it comes to eating as a family, phones off. And people look at me, so why aren't you answering that? And I go, well, I pay for voicemail. I need to use it.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's an interesting concept about 5 nights a week. I don't know anyone who does that, Alex. So I tip my hat off to you. That is a great example for not only yourself, but for your children. That's setting a good standard and foundation with them.
We just, we hear too often, especially being young, when my wife and I got married when we were 20, we would go to, our wedding, our anniversary parties of people that were 50, and they would all say the same thing. Our kids are this way because we sat at the dinner table, because we did this at the dinner table. There was no reason not to be there, and still to this day they're doing it. So my wife and I are hoping to do it, to be that place for everybody to come to.
That's great. So I think they were right. And I'd love to see that, I'd love to see that tradition become a part of the American family again.
Nice.
Really
Thanks again, guys. I appreciate it. Everything was awesome.
Alex, thank you.
You guys were awesome. Thank you.
Thank you,
for
man.
adding positive value, Alex. Really appreciate it. This is a great conversation as usual. Again, we have spaces open to people who want to jump in. It's our conversation, meaning everyone, not just myself and Robert. It's a wonderful conversation and learning some things that do exist and things that don't exist. Brad is saying here, 1 brother and 3 sisters, and we had family dinner and prayer.
Wow. Yep.
So, Brad, I want to ask, though, do you do the family roundtable because you come from a background of dinner and prayer? Are you able to do that now? So you can either, preferably would love you to jump in, but if not, certainly leave a comment or two. What do you think it takes for people, Robert, to get to this point of having the family roundtable? You gave an example of yourself. But what do you think it would take for men, women, etc., but specifically men, to start implementing, or what would cause them to start doing this family roundtable?
Well, hopefully someone will hear this, this conversation that we're having, and it'll give people the idea. I think in many cases, people don't think that it's possible to do it. So just creating the sense of possibility and talking about the benefits of it, not just to our families, but to society and culture, and obviously to our children, to set this model for communication and intimacy and vulnerability in the family as a part of, mental and emotional health and having a closer family connection. I don't think people think about that. This just being able to talk to each other and say how you feel, what an incredible dynamic that creates between any group of people, but particularly a family, in terms of trust, a sense of security, a sense of being loved as well. So I think, like I said, just the possibility of having these kinds of conversation and putting it out there, I think is one way to do it.
Something just popped into my head that it seems to me that these days we're so much of a society of doing, we're not thinking about being.
Exactly. More than ever.
Yeah, it's more about do, not be, not just being and doing that. And I know that one of the things that can always bring people together is food.
Yeah, exactly. That's the perfect place. And the dinner table is, because of the food, an intimate environment already. You're sharing sustenance, you're sharing food, So it automatically, in a sense, brings you closer. And that's why I chose the Thanksgiving we chose Christmas, but those kinds of holidays are perfect opportunities for opening a dialogue with family. And I think, the not waiting for, problems or disasters to happen to come together and get to know each other. I think there's this assumption that we sort of know each other because we live together. And I think that's part of it too. So, but what are the things you hear most often? I don't know how that happened. People saying, I don't know where that came from. I never suspected that was true. She's not like that. He's not like that. They would never do something like that. Because the truth is, we don't really know these people who are so close to us that well, unless we're making the effort consistently to do that.
Well, and I just want to build onto that a lot, we don't even completely know each other ourselves. So how can we say
absolutely right
else?
Right.
We're always, for many of us who are conscious enough, we're always in that journey to find out more and be deeper with ourselves and know our inner being and our inner purpose. And you just build on that. And you hear that a lot when people go their separate ways in relationships.
Yep, absolutely. You're right. Knowing yourself is a big part of that. And seeing, your reflection in other people. That's why when we do the family roundtable, we tell each other person how we feel about them so that they get the perspective of all the other people, how they see us. That's really important. Yeah. Just exactly what you said, to be more aware, how we impact each other.
Well, before Robert and I went live today, I said I always like to bring real life examples from my own journey to share with him. And I had one of those moments this weekend, so it's a little bit of a story, but about a month and a half ago, a very close friend of the family, she passed away. She was 84 years old. And I've been very blessed that not only my mother, but there were a few other, about two other ladies in my life who have known me all my life. And, she passed away, gone to a better place. And the husband is an amazing guy. And during the funeral, I mentioned to him that, you know what, I lost a mother today, and I want to make a point of coming to see you.
Oh, that's great.
Well, last Saturday, this gentleman and my dad have known each other for over 60 years.
Wow.
And even to the point we were at a friends and family picnic about a month and a half ago, and my dad was there with me, and this gentleman called my dad saying, "Hey, how you doing? I wish I was there." So I said, let's just get them together, and we had it on Saturday. So my dad and two other really close friends, they all knew each other, and I bought the food. And we sat on the back patio, and like all men of Jamaican heritage, discussed politics.
There you go.
And what's going on in Jamaica. But the gentleman who had lost his mother recently, was tapping me on the leg and making sure that I was involved in the conversation, treating like I was, even though we're not blood relatives, I treat him like an uncle.
Right.
Having that family conversation.
Yeah.
Talking about politics. We also talked about each other's lives, etc. And having that was huge. And I think building on that, especially with the family roundtable, the importance of intergenerational sharing is huge too.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's a big part of family educations that don't happen anymore because we're separated from your grandparents and they're not as close usually. And so making sure those interactions happen and seeing the family as a complete family. And that's why I think, on holidays, that's a great time to do that because you get to see the extended family sometimes. And that's really important to see. And to see the interactions between all the generations, I think is really good for everybody, not just the kids,
It sets a good example also.
Yeah, exactly.
For the younger people that, like, as I said, the Family Roundtable is a good foundation. And again, Alex, who was on earlier, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Like
he's doing it right. He absolutely is. Yeah.
He's setting his children up for success in regards. Yeah. And let's just see here. And Brad is saying, no, very rare at our house. Of course, my kids are gone from home. Well, you still have your wife, or you can have the round table. Just because the kids
That's true. That's true. That's an important relationship too.
yeah, absolutely. And not stopping to have those digital roundtables also. And I'm sure they
Right.
come around once in a while. That's a great
Yeah.
opportunity to have them, whether they're there or not, even by phone. Just having those roundtables make a big difference.
And just, bringing the concepts together, the concept that we talk about, the eulogy for the living and the family roundtable, they're all about bringing a sense of intimacy, communication into our lives, and closeness, and developing that. And as you mentioned, also a level of self-awareness in the process. So all of these exercises are about bringing us closer together and a closer understanding of who we are as well.
Well, and also tying that all those qualities or traits that you mentioned to are cores of masculinity, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And as men, I think we should take the leadership position in these things. I really do. These are acts of courage and leadership.
Very, very true. What what do you say to the man that says, you know what? I don't got the courage. I don't got the leadership. I don't want to jump off that ledge, or I don't want to even, let alone jump off. I don't even want to put my toe across that ledge. Because I'm
Well,
sure you come across men like that in
yeah,
coaching practice.
yeah, absolutely. And what I suggest is don't do it alone. And I offer in many cases my personal assistance, but I give them the concept statement that I have, which has step by step sort of guidelines to set it up and how to have the conversation, and just to try it. Just try it.
I guess a little mini role play here. So I'm your client, Robert. You're telling me, okay, don't do it alone.
Right.
I'm Dr. Vibe. I don't got any friends. I can't. I'm afraid. I don't got anybody.
Well, if you said that, I'd say, well, first of all, we should work on getting some friends. But, I would say, well, you and let's have the conversation. Pretend I'm someone in your family, and you have something you want to tell them. What would you say? And, role play the conversation a little bit. And then, then walk them through the process that I've laid out for how to do that. Enroll other people. Who's the person you're closest to in your family? Can you enroll them in the idea?
Nice.
Maybe you practice it with them, and then the two of you together approach somebody else together, and you build a group that way,
And the reason why I wanted to go through that, because you and I probably know a number of men that will tell you they have no friends.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a bigger issue. I mean, yeah. That's not something that there's a simple solution for, but I think, you start that discussion of, well, do you want to? And why not? Why don't you? And what are you missing? So, you have that kind of dialogue to bring to them. What's the downside of that? What are you missing out on, and what is it costing you? So as soon as you see what's costing you, then, I think there's some incentive to say, hey, maybe I should, make a change here, And I think a lot of times the problem is and one of the reasons the living eulogy is a great exercise is we don't recognize what we're losing until it's gone.
So let me ask then, Robert, what was it costing you not doing the family roundtable?
It's a good question. And it was the cost that, when it hit me, made me decide to change that. I realized that I wasn't feeling as close to my family as I wanted to, as I did when I was a kid. When I was young and Christmas came around, it was just the best time in the world. And I realized as an adult, it had gotten pretty far away from that kind of feeling. But I felt it when I got together with my family, but then I wasn't even feeling it then. And some of it's just being a kid and you're oblivious to a lot of things that are going on. So, you're not aware. And so you live in this kind of bubble. But I realized that as an adult, I didn't feel close to my family. And how did I get that back? I thought, well, the only way to do that is to like get into a conversation where we talk about how we feel about each other. And that's how it evolved. So I said, well, and I came up with this idea, well, what if we just went around the table, pretty straightforward, and told each other how we felt about each other? It wasn't an act of genius. It was pretty flat-footed in a way, but it really worked. It really, I mean, as I said, most of the time we ended in tears, but they were tears of joy, to be reaffirming how much we actually really cared about each other, to say the words. Saying the words matters. You can do things, you can give people things. Saying the words really matters.
As you're just sharing there, follow me with something, and I think it may be something that a lot of men experience. Boys grow up, go to school, etc., and all that, and they focus on their career.
Right.
For a lot of men and young men, the career in a lot of cases is ahead of the family. And then they may reach a certain point in their journey saying, you know what? The career ain't all that.
Yeah.
It's the family that really matters.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, I fundamentally believe that relationships are really what matters in our lives. We may not be aware of that. We become focused on other things, as you mentioned. We're directed in those ways. But it's all about relationships. When you're on your deathbed, I doubt you're going to be saying, oh, if I could have only earned another $10,000 last year. You're going to be looking around for who's sitting by the bed, who's there, who have you connected with, who matters in your life. So I absolutely believe that that's true. Relationships are what matter to me. They always have been. And I believe that's true for the vast majority of us,
Yeah. Yeah, it lets me share another story. A number of years ago, associate of mine doing well in the business world, etc. And then we found out that he had prostate cancer. And I said, okay, well, let me go see him. And I went in the hospital, and I asked him, how many people are visiting you? He said, hardly anybody. And I said, wow, I would have thought that I'd have to be in a lineup
really
to see you. And I'm going, wow.
Yeah.
How many people he had mentored, helped, and all that. And I just
really?
Went, wow. And it's going, and he said, yeah, he said, Vibe, this has been a big learning point for me.
Oh, that's surprising, since he had helped so many people too.
It was just really, I went, wow.
Yeah.
But he said to me, I got my family.
There you go. There you go.
I got my family. I got the round table, and that's what he bases his foundation on. And it challenges me at times when I see obviously men not getting that, but obviously sometimes they have to learn the hard way, or they have to go through something.
Yeah.
To that family roundtable setting, whether it's
right
sitting at a table or just concerning about family as much as possible.
Right. It's relationships that, I mean, we're communal animals. We're about relationship to each other. And so to not have that, it's a huge vacuum, huge hole in our lives to not have those connections. And I think that's particularly hard for men. I think it's one of the reasons men don't live as long as women.
It's very, very true. With the men that you have mentored over the years, when you initially meet them, just off the top of your head, what percentage of them are concerned or saying, I have a lack of relationship with my family?
I'd say a fair percentage of them do. Wow. I really do. I mean, I think, if you're not having conversation, and basically what we're talking about is families having conversations with each other in the family roundtable. So it starts right there. If you're not talking to each other at home, who are you talking to? You know, you may have, I mean, you may talk to your friends and you may develop other relationships, but, you know, learning to talk, to be able to have conversation and want to have those conversations. If you don't learn that as a kid, you know, where are you going to get that from? And that's another reason that the Family Roundtable is of value also, to learn to have conversation, to learn to be able to express yourself, to become aware of yourself, you know. Oh, how do I feel about that? Oh, this is how I feel, you know. It's really critical.
It's part of what Robert and other people we've had on this journey called men's work.
Yes, absolutely.
Very,
And it's important work too.
it's
And
important work.
the benefits are extraordinary. The
Absolutely.
benefits of great relationships with your family and being able to communicate with them intimately as we grow older, is there's nothing better. Nothing better.
Well, again, I was at an event on Saturday. There were 3 men there over 80 years old.
Wow.
And
God bless.
who have known each other for over 60 years.
Wow.
And
There's some friendships, huh?
whew, I mean, and they don't go more than 2 days without calling each other to see how they're doing.
That's wonderful. That's awesome. Yeah. The relationships can sustain you, man.
Yeah, well,
They
yeah,
make life worth living.
absolutely. Well, and they have their round tables every few days.
That's great.
They have them every few days. Well, Robert, gonna start winding it down as usual. I'd like
Yep.
to say thank you for taking time out of your positive, productive schedule to share with us. Do you have any closing comments for our audience?
I would only say that I hope this discussion has encouraged you to create a family dialogue, perhaps a family roundtable of your own. Start small, talk to one person at a time if you have to. But, you know, utilize those family events and those holidays as a time to get together and really talk to each other and express how you feel. You know, simply alone for the fact that we don't know, you know, when we may see each other again. You know, there's no guarantees. But to put it on a more positive level, there's so much that we share with our families that we don't even know in terms of how we feel about things and experiences that we've had. And the opportunity to share those things is what makes life worth living.
Wonderful.
So please do.
Absolutely. If people want to get in contact with you, what's the best method?
You can contact me on my email if anybody wants a copy of the concept statements or any tips or advice about creating their own roundtable. I'd be happy to send that to them. And so using my email is the best way to reach me.
And your email address?
It's HOM, which stands for Heart of Man, HOM coaching @gmail.com.
There you go. Not home coaching,
Right.
HOM coaching.
HOM coaching
Yes.
@gmail.com.
Excellent. Well, again, thanks again, Robert, for taking
Thank you,
time.
Dr. Rod.
No problem. Also want to thank Mark, Deb, Roden, Mr. Lee, Luke. We had Alex who came in earlier on. Thank you so much. And we had some other people watching live.
Don't forget Brad.
And Brad, yes. Big Bad Brad. Can't forget Big
Right.
Bad Brad. And this is part of a series of epic conversations called M&M Explorers, hosted by the Men and Masculinity organization. We have another epic conversation coming tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern time. That's August 27th. We have Steve Anderson coming on, talking about how do you handle yourself when challenges come into your life?
That should be a great conversation.
It will be. So, like to thank everybody for watching live and on the replay. Thank you very much. Take care. And also go to the website, www.menandmasculinity.com. You'll see the replays of this and other epic conversations. Good night, everybody, and thanks for stopping by.